Hey everyone, we're back with episode 2 of a 2-part series with videographer and photojournalist Austin Anderson. His survival stories, his extreme weather stories are amazing. On this episode, we're going to hear his harrowing tale of what it was like to get sucked into the El Reno tornado and go airborne, barely surviving it, but living to tell the story. We're also going to hear how taking refuge to save his life and others in a hurricane ended him up in an elevated beach house in a hot tub of all places. Amazing stories from Austin Anderson. That's what we're going to be covering on this episode of the GeoTrek podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Hurricane Hal, your host of the GeoTrek podcast, where we explore the world to bring you stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow our content online. And of course, our growing and popular YouTube page. You can actually watch these interviews on video format there on GeoTrek YouTube. Well, without further introduction, let's jump into episode 2 with videographer and photojournalist Austin Anderson. Austin, great to have you back on the GeoTrek podcast for episode 2 here with you.
This is a fantastic podcast. I've so enjoyed talking to you on episode 1. I hope everybody catches that one too.
Man, Austin, it was amazing to talk about your journey into videography, some of these early news stories you covered, and then we covered all these different weather story angles that you've covered in episode number 1. I really want to hear your Superstorm Sandy story. I know you have some stories you haven't shared in episode 1. Tell us a little bit about Sandy and what you learned in that.
Well, that was an interesting storm because in the past, hurricanes usually didn't go up that high in latitude. So, as you know, Superstorm Sandy was a disaster for New York City, even subways flooding. And I was assigned to Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey. Went out there, it's a barrier island, and the day before the storm, the whole island was evacuated except for the media, and most of the photographers from there were from New York City, from the networks in like Fox News and NBC and CNN. And a lot of those New York photographers had never covered a hurricane before. And so the first thing I did at the only hotel that remained open after the island was evacuated was go to the front desk and ask, what's your elevation here at the hotel? And the young lady didn't know, but she called somebody who was in charge, and they said, oh, we're the highest property in Point Pleasant Beach. We're at 18 feet above sea level. And I looked at the reports of storm surge that it was going to be about 20 feet. And right there, that far north in New Jersey. So I promptly went out, took my rental Suburban from LaGuardia, and I drove it up onto the grass, into the bush next to the building, and with the front end of the car as high up as I could get it. And all the other photojournalists from New York are watching me do this, including the Fox News guys with $1 million satellite trucks sitting there in the parking lot. And they walk over, and one of them was brave enough to say, what in the world are you doing? And all I said was, oh, you'll see. And so as the storm was coming in that night, maybe 6-7 hours later, of course, the predictions were true. Storm surge was getting up above 18 feet, and water was it was raging, cutting through across the parking lot and filling up the parking lot to about 1.5 feet. And where the waves are crashing through in the parking lot, I stood behind a brick wall and filmed maybe 10 mile an hour water rushing through, and looked behind me, and there was foam gathering around from the waves, and the parking lot was now up to my thighs, and those poor guys with Fox News were trying to figure out what to do with their satellite truck to save it, because water was starting to get into the floor of the satellite truck. I'm sure that was an expensive problem.
Yeah, so you nailed the forecast. Well, you did the right thing. You knew what the storm surge forecast was. You checked the elevation, and you thought, man, this is going to be close. Like we like to say in Texas, this ain't your first rodeo, right? You've been in a lot of hurricanes before and knew what to do. Even just that action, moving your car up to the highest ground you could find, made all the difference, right?
That's right. And now that storm surge is getting more and more accurate, as you know, because you're a professor of storm surge, and we then, as the storm left, now the island was covered with sand, and so we couldn't drive very far because everybody was trying to get the damage. And so I tell the producer, Melody Taylor, who was with me, I said, we're just going to drive up the road as far as we can and then walk the rest of the way. So we stopped, got out of the car, and started walking up the beach to where these huge houses had been washed off their foundations. There were still gas mains that used to be connected to the houses spewing out gas in the air. And people who didn't evacuate were kind of wandering around in a daze like, what just happened? What just hit us? And so we're getting all these great shots of interviews with people, and walked back the 2 miles that we walked in the sand back to the NBC satellite truck, fed all that to New York. And pretty soon the phone's ringing from headquarters saying, who shot this? How did they get that? Because they're seeing the feeds from everybody else, that it's just all around Point Pleasant Beach, not where the houses were wiped out.
So you took that extra effort and, walked and got out to those access points. But this is really interesting for you. You had covered a lot of hurricanes with a lot of storm surge, so you knew how destructive the surge was. It sounds like you're saying some of these folks from the northeastern states, I mean, they had never seen anything like this in living memory. It sounds like both for survival of the storm, how to save their vehicles, but also how to get to where the big impact photos and videos would be. It sounds like you had some angles that the locals weren't seeing or didn't know about.
Didn't know how to do that. It was clear to me that you couldn't drive there anymore because it's covered with sand, and you just are kind of a soupy sand. So let's just walk up there.
So Austin, do you often have in your mind, we talked in episode 1 about how fluid you are, that you might shift or be flexible to change the focus of your story. Once you have that goal, like I want to get out to those houses that washed away, do you just then keep pushing on different doors to see what opens? And like, if you can't drive, you'll walk or take a canoe or, whatever you have to do.
A canoe or something.
You'll just
try
different things to get to that story you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's part of the art of being a good photojournalist, is not letting impedances get in your way of finding the story. Just keep at it. Perseverance.
Austin, what are some other very creative ways to get from point A to point B? I mean, I'm sure you have tons, and we've talked about hurricanes. I know you've covered all kinds of disasters. What are some creative ways that you've moved yourself from one location to another because you're like, that's where the shot is, but I can't drive there? What are some things that stand out to you?
Well, I've gone from everything from riding a mountain bike to interview another mountain biker off in the wilderness, to rappelling with my camera on my shoulder down some rocks to talk to a rock climber. And then there's been other cases where it's been important to have 4-wheel drive to get places. And if that doesn't work, you can always hike in. You just have to be in good shape, I think. So.
No, for sure. Well, and you talked about in Isabel, the car got stuck in sand, and you walked a bit. Austin, just something that this is an Austin style event. The only thing I can probably relate to, I was trying to get into Mexico Beach after Hurricane Michael, and I was with a friend of mine that was in the Air Force National Guard, and we went to the checkpoint. It was all military, and they said, yeah, come along, because I had my buddy with me that was in the Air Force. Well, the next
perfect.
back where I really needed to document, I did not have my Air Force buddy, and they said, this is a perimeter, you cannot enter. And so I said, well, I'm a storm surge scientist. They didn't care, but I was like, I need to see what happened. So I drove about 3/4 of a mile out, and I literally on my hands and knees went through a Florida swamp for about 2 hours.
Wow.
unpack way, but I mean, it sounds like something you would have done. And
I would have done that too.
not at
Yeah.
Mexico Beach. It was the first time I was seeing the destruction. I snuck in through the swamp, covered in mud, and I was not in for more than 3 minutes. And someone said, "Excuse me, sir," and I'm like, "Oh no, I got busted." And they said, "Would you like a hot dog or chocolate milk?" Like, or they said, "Would you like a hot dog or Gatorade?" It was somehow they helicoptered in food relief, and I thought that.
Wow.
I was in trouble, and they just said, "Would you like a hot dog or Gatorade?" I said, "No, I'm good." But it was your style of kind of coming in the back door. I know you've done it a lot more than I have, but I've done it. I've had a little taste of it to know it's not easy, but it gets you where you need to be, and you get that unique angle on the storm.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I've got to hand it to you, Hal. That's just like impressive going through a swamp too. That
You know what was the
amazing.
weird thing about that swamp? I did not see one mosquito, one fly, one frog, snake. This was after Cat 5 Hurricane Michael. It was
Yeah.
like I was the only living thing on earth. It was the weirdest thing to me. And at one point I saw 3 or 4 fire ants. I was literally hands and knees through brush with thorns. And an entomologist told me that like fire ants can get tremendous amounts of venom when they're stressed. And I had bites on my ankle from Hurricane Gustav.
Yeah.
And I wondered why my ankles got so swollen. And an entomologist said when animals are stressed, their venom levels will often go way up. So I was really concerned about fire ant bites and this kind of thing. Have you ever had any interactions with poisonous animals when you're covering storms or you're going through, like in that case, I had some interactions with fire ants, but fortunately, didn't see any displaced gators or snakes or anything. Have you ever had interactions with creepy crawlies?
Oh, sure. And fire ants, they will try to save themselves in floodwaters, and you'll have floating mounds of millions of fire ants. And if you run into one of those, they'll climb on you, try to climb up, get out of the water. Yeah.
I've seen this before. I've heard they can kind of trap air bubbles and they're floating as a community, right?
That's right. Exactly.
So
there was a hurricane I covered in Alabama, Gulf Shores, that the storm surge was high enough to where at the alligator farm, the water was up above the chain link fence. And so there were loose gators everywhere in Gulf Shores after that. And so I, of course, was going to go down and try to find one and film it. So, but I didn't, thank goodness.
I've heard of a lot of snakes too. Everyone says Hurricane
Yes.
Carla in 1961, there were millions of snakes displaced in southeast Texas. Everyone talks about, I guess, the snakes coming out of the marshes, and they're looking for dry ground just like humans, right?
Dry ground, just like all we are, yeah. And in Katrina, I was there at landfall in Gulfport, and that was incredible. And you talk about no mosquitoes or creepy crawly things. I was under the impression that sleeping in my car that night after Katrina cleared Gulfport, it must be that they got blown away from the area. The birds weren't chirping, the mosquitoes weren't biting, so it was clear air. It was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because after the storm, the weather's pleasant, but like you said, you can have this little vacuum where all the living things are gone, just probably not surviving that wind velocity for very long.
Right, right.
Yeah, Austin, really interesting perspectives just on these, again, coastal storms, floods. And we often warn people to stay out of floodwater. It's not just that you can drown, right? It's the creepy crawlies, the oil and gas and chemicals. It's just, as you know better than anyone, floodwater is not really a place that a common person wants to find themselves, right?
Well, and you also can keep in mind the overflow of sewage in floodwaters. So you were talking about Gustav, and Katrina was the same down in New Orleans. Could you imagine that water down on Canal Street that I was in, where all the sewage systems have backed up and are overflowing into the streets, mixing in with that floodwater?
Yeah, it can be very contaminated. Do you do anything to take precautions against contaminated water, or do you just wash off and disinfect really well afterwards? What do you do for contaminated water?
That's a good question. I carry waders with me and rubber boots. Sometimes the rubber boots I have thrown away just because I know they are going to stink. And the waders I'll clean really well. I don't let floodwaters really get on my skin because you just don't know what kind of bugs or ants or germs are going to be attacking you. So.
Sure. Great advice there, Austin, just for anyone dealing with floodwater, coastal storms, or hurricanes. So, Austin, we told our listeners, we promised that they would hear your El Reno tornado story.
Yeah.
El Reno tornado, a mega tornado in Oklahoma, the widest documented tornado. And it had a lot of surprises, even for seasoned storm chasers. Unfortunately, it was a fatal tornado, not only for the public, but for within the chase community as well. Could you paint for us the picture of, and the context of you covering the El Reno tornado, where you were, who you were with, and really what happened?
Of course. The El Reno tornado taught us I don't want to include myself as a scientist, but more photojournalist society, and also the whole community of those who are in active weather, that there are a lot of mistakes made, but also a lot of education. Sadly, Tim Samaras and his son and a fellow photographer in the same vehicle were all killed by El Reno. They were only about a quarter of a mile behind us and had turned left on a dirt road and were not making much progress in the mud when the storm hit them, tore their car apart. And the storm had hit us in our car as well and picked our car up maybe 100 feet in the air. We're not sure how far up we went. But this was all a culmination of a 3-week-long tornado hunt, 2013, that we participated in a joint venture with NBC News and the Weather Channel. And we had a satellite truck and a caravan, a couple of support vehicles, and the vehicle that the meteorologist Mike Bettis was in, and I was driving. And the photographer, Brad Reynolds, was in the back seat. Well, as we went live for nightly news at 5:30 Central, we were talking about the thunderstorm that was starting to form in a huge tornado. And in 30 minutes, we went live again for the Weather Channel at 6:01 with the tornado 50 miles away behind Bettis. And it was very dramatic live shot. And as he's talking about the storm headed right for El Reno, he realizes, hey, we're in El Reno. We better get out of here. And so we jump back in our cars, the engineers in the satellite truck following us. And Bettis decided, looking on his iPad and the radar, that the storm was coming northeast and was going to hit the town of El Reno. So he said, we all need to go south to get out of El Reno. So we started doing that as fast as we could. But the image back then in 2013 was, we're talking 13 years ago. We're getting up on 13 years ago. It was a 5-minute delay on radar by the time it gets to your iPad. It's faster now, but that delay caused problems we were already in the subvortices that were in front of the El Reno tornado. And the first thing that happened was the Suburban in front of us in our caravan got picked up and shoved off to the bar ditch in front of us. And Bettis yelled, go faster, go as fast as you possibly can. And debris is hitting us. It's getting darker and darker, and wind is blowing horizontal. Brad is in the back seat filming what he can. And the next thing you know, our car gets rocked sideways, and I'm trying to go forward. But then Brad puts the camera down in the back seat, and next thing you know, we're airborne, taking off like a rocket into the funnel cloud.
Was this one of the subvortices, or was this the main vortex?
Later, it was determined that it was a subvortice of 300 miles an hour that picked us up. But we thought it was all in the general area of the El Reno tornado.
And was this the same subvortex that picked up Tim Samaras' vehicle?
We think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're driving this. It has Bettis and Reynolds, and you guys are in a caravan.
And we're going south, whereas Tim Samaras went east.
I understand. Yeah. And all of a sudden, these 300-mile-an-hour winds pick you up and make you airborne.
And the guys in the satellite truck later said that they were watching our hazards blink in front of them, and the next thing you know, they go off into space and disappear. And meanwhile, all the glass in the car blows out because of the pressure gradient. And I'm pushing myself in the back against the back seat, and Bettis is yelling, "Hold on, brothers!" And I'm feeling us go upside down like in a space capsule or something. And wind is now shooting through the car and debris. And the next thing you know, the car crashes down to earth on the roof on my side and shoved down on my head and broke my back, and my spine was moved over and rib cage was broken at the sternum. And I didn't know that, but we were starting to roll across the pasture. On the other side of a 4-lane divided highway, we'd been carried at least 160 yards as we crashed and rolled. We rolled at least 8 or 9 times over and over. And I can remember my face hitting the ground each time my side of the car rolled.
All right,
and,
you have no window anymore. You're literally hitting the ground.
Hitting the ground with my face, right. And when we came to a stop, the crashed up, smashed car, and we're inside and just roaring sound of debris flying, shooting us, hitting us in the face. And Bettis is yelling, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I said, "I think I am. I think I broke some ribs or something," because I was having trouble catching my breath. And Brad was okay in the back seat. He had laid down and was grabbing onto the seat. His camera, though, had fallen out as the car was in midair and landed on its side on the other side of the barbed wire fence in the grass, and the car lands in front of the camera, and the camera is still recording while it lands on its side. So that video is still on YouTube today that you can see.
So it just so happened that that camera kept recording and it got some of the vehicle rolls, right?
Yeah, the car rolling across the pasture. Amazing.
Austin, what do you remember? Like, do you remember being airborne, or did it all just happen so fast?
It happened so fast, but I do remember being airborne because we were just like floating in the air and turning upside down.
Did you get the sense of time slowing down?
And time was slowing down for sure, because all my memories of everything slowly have, over 13 years, started slowly coming back to me about what happened in that short amount of time that we were in air and then hit the ground. And some things like the hitting the side of the dirt with my face. I didn't remember that at first for a couple of years, but I do remember it now. And it was a case where, as we came to a stop, we looked behind us and the tornado still going on past us, just left us there in the pasture. And Bettis yells, "Let's see if we can get out." And my door was too jammed to get out, but we climbed out of that side of the car, and there's a debris field all the way back to the barbed wire fence. And I got up and I go, "Ooh, I can't, this is hurting." And I looked in the ground, and there's my phone covered with mud. And it had fallen out of the car in one of those rolls. And I picked it up and it was still on. So I texted my wife back in Austin. And I said, "We were just picked up by a tornado and I think I'm okay." So she calls back and says, "You better go to the hospital and get checked out." And I said, "Oh, I've had broken ribs before. That's all right." But we did. We went to the hospital anyway. And so it turns out that they determined that I didn't have a concussion, thank goodness, but I had a lot of broken bones and a broken neck. But all the adrenaline was, seizing up all these muscles, trying to hold my rib cage together. And I was out of commission for at least 2 years after that.
Wow, long road to recovery. I wanted to ask you then, when you started healing and you had the option to get back into covering extreme weather work again, did you have hesitation with it, or were you ready to jump back in?
That's a really good question, Hal, because as I was laying there with a toilet bowl on my neck and black eye and thinking that, do I want to do this anymore? And I said, well, yes, I do. And was thinking that I need to learn more about weather in order to be safer. I got to learn what the storm chasers know about the vocabulary of a thunderstorm, the hail cores and whale tail, all those things that I didn't know at the time, so I can be smarter. And however, decided that no, I don't need to chase storms anymore. And that's all because of one thing that has gone on in the last decade since this happened, was people getting video of tornadoes with their cell phones and sharing it on social media. So now we don't need to send a professional cameraman from the network journalist out to try to get video of the storms, because that's going to be there. What we need to do is use that video at the first part of our story, and then the rest of it cover and film interviews and aftermath of what has happened.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like you're saying don't duplicate the work that's already out there. We already see maybe dozens of shots of the tornado itself. It sounds like you're saying what are the angles that you can cover parts of the story that are not being covered?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying, is that the everybody can nowadays with their phones get dramatic, amazing video of tornadoes. A decade ago, 13 years ago, we didn't see that many videos of tornadoes like we do now. Even flying a drone next to one, that is amazing video. But it's all shared and most of the time used with permission. However, as a professional cameraman covering the news, more importantly, people don't really go out and interview victims like the news coverage does. You don't see that on social media with their cell phones talking to people. They just are getting the dramatic video of the tornado and not the aftermath.
Well, that's exactly it, Austin. I think a lot of the chasers now are recording the winds, the flood levels, but they're missing out on that human element that maybe you're able to come in and get the aftermath, but also interviews with storm victims.
That's right. And that's what continues to drive me, not being scared of covering severe weather anymore, but being more intrigued by covering it and getting the aftermath and the stories behind it.
Well, and that brings up a great point, Austin. And I wanted to ask you, really, with emerging technology, with everyone having a smartphone now, where do you see videography going in the next, say, 10 to 15 years?
That's a great question. Just because there's been such a revolution since the iPhone was invented, that people have become citizen journalists. And unfortunately, on some aspects, they haven't learned to balance with their reporting. However, I see in 10 years, not only is the technology going to be increasing to the degree of they probably won't even need to send people out into the severe weather anymore, but also people will know right away what's going on. And there's one aspect that I want to bring up that maybe you will be part of in developing, is a more pinpoint accuracy of a forecast. For example, you can hear from your meteorologist on TV, on the news that night, oh, there's going to be a bad thunderstorm hitting our town tomorrow, and it's a 60, 80, 100% chance of rain. But where is those particular cells going to develop and hit? And we don't know that yet. There's in the 13 years since El Reno, there have been so many great advances of predictions. Even like in this storm I was just covering the last few days in Minneapolis, they knew exactly, the Weather Service knew exactly where the heaviest snow was going to fall, but not specifically, which town. They could say, okay, it's going to be 8 to 12 inches in Minneapolis, but they were wrong. It was less.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Austin, getting that more precise forecast that's personalized. I know at GeoTrek, we talk about, and we're involved to some degree in innovating what we believe a future of address-based flood forecasting. Imagine if you could have the flood forecast for your home, will your house flood or not? It comes down to people wanting to know what's going to happen in my neighborhood, what's going to happen in my home. And I agree with you. If we could get more pinpoint forecasts, I think that would help the public, but also videographers and people documenting these storms as well.
Well, exactly right. And that's why I applaud GeoTracker and what you're doing, Hal, is that amazing to be able to maybe in less than 10 years be able to pinpoint, oh, this neighborhood in Florida will get a 15-foot storm surge. And so be
Austin,
ready for it.
I know our listeners, especially young professionals starting out, they're going to hear your stories and say, my goodness, for people really into extreme weather or for people really into photojournalism, videography, they're going to be really interested to hear your advice on this. What advice do you have for young professionals starting out in the field, especially videography, but also documenting extreme weather work? What advice do you have for young professionals?
Thanks for that question. We talked about anticipating what's going to happen and knowing where to film and how to shoot things. But I think in for the young people that are getting into this business, I think it's going above and beyond what is expected of you is so important because you have to love what you're doing in order to motivate yourself to get more than your fellow photographer. So, for example, once you learn the ropes of how to operate the equipment, it's got to become similar to operating or playing a musical instrument. And like working a camera, it has to become second nature. So that thought process doesn't get in the way of what to film and getting in and filming what happens in front of you. Because if you're busy thinking about, oh, did I get the white balance right, or is this in focus, or maybe it's underexposed, so that distracts you from what's happening in front of your lens. And so I think people beginning in this business will not only be able to know what's happening, but also anticipate what's going on in front of them.
Well, it sounds like you're suggesting learn the technology so well that you're just kind of on autopilot, and then you can actually free up some mental bandwidth to maybe think more about the angle of the story or the people you could interact with. You're not as distracted with working the technology.
And you said that much more succinctly than I did. Thank you.
Austin, you also mentioned like you've taken time to learn how to edit, and that's made you a better at filming and recording, right?
Yeah, and that's another important thing I think to do is learn all the jobs of reporting. For example, if you know how to edit video, then when you're shooting it, before ever editing, you're thinking of editing. So when I'm filming something, I'm thinking tight, medium, and wide shots that will be able to cut together to tell the story in a sequence. And I'm also thinking of lines of copy in my head as I'm filming something. So if I'm at an aftermath of a tornado disaster, for example, I shoot a wide shot of a house that's rubble. What next shot happens after that? Maybe something that catches my eye in that wide shot, a teddy bear on its side. So I'll walk up and get a tight shot of that. So I'm editing basically in the camera. So when it comes time to edit, because I know how to edit, that's all laid out and able to cut together much quicker and tells the story better.
I see what you're saying. So you're really thinking through the chronology of the story as an editor would, and then you're like, okay, these are the pieces we'll need. So that kind of helps inform your decision making when you're out there in the field.
Exactly right, and it really will carry you a long way in what people think of your videography. They'll think, wow, this person knows how to tell a story with the shots that they're getting.
Austin, I know our listeners are going to want to check out your amazing videography work that you've recorded and made available. How can people find you online, or how can people find you, say, on social media to see more about your work and what you've done?
Sure. Well, you're kind to ask. I put up Austin Anderson on Facebook. That's mostly travels and travails. And I also put samples of work out on Austin Anderson on YouTube. And on Instagram, I'll post things of work that I'm doing out in the field for the networks, so called news breaks.
Austin, we'll make sure to share those links in the show notes so people can find you. And the original way I ran in touch with you was at the National Tropical Weather Conference. I know you go to different conferences. People can always join us at NTWC in person in South Padre Island every April. A lot of great folks there in the weather community. And I know you like to get out there. You're engaging and out there in the field in an extreme weather environment. So if our listeners are into chasing, if they're into getting out into extreme weather environments, they're probably going to cross paths with you at some point.
I think so. Last night on I-35 coming south from Minneapolis, past a storm chaser was all marked up with his truck here in Oklahoma. And I thought, I'll just wave at him. See? But then at the National Tropical Weather Conference, that's something that is so important to me for education. I started going to that after the El Reno tornado, thinking, as we talked about, how is knowing more about weather and knowing more about severe weather, how to deal with it. And it's been so educational to go to that conference every year, and I'm so glad to see you there every year.
One of my favorite parts of NTWC is every year when you share your presentation with the high school students. And
oh, yeah.
Wide-eyed they get when they see your footage, your videos, and your pics from El Reno and your other adventures. It's like, wow, they're blown away to meet someone like you. So I know they love having you there, and it's great to have you as part of the weather community.
Well, thank you. Those students, I enjoyed talking to them the first day of the conference.
Austin, I always say no one has any weather stories like you do. You're unique. You're a very special character in the weather field. I've learned a ton from you, and I know that our listeners are going to love these 2 episodes we've done with you. As we wrap up this episode of the GeoTrek podcast, I wanted to ask you, what's one last take-home message you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, you're so kind to have me on GeoTracker. I've so enjoyed talking to you. Maybe one message I could say that to be safe is to know what you're doing. If you're out there trying to get video of a tornado or chasing storms, know how storms behave, because there could be so many mistakes made that you can ruin your car by driving into a hailstorm that you don't need to drive into a hailstorm. You just look at your radar and say, oh, that's purple, I'm not going there. And that you don't need to be as close to a tornado or in a tornado like I was to get good video of it.
Well, that's right. Austin, you said like sometimes if you're farther back from the tornado, and you're actually seeing some airborne debris, things like that, it can actually be more visually captivating than actually if you're right there with the funnel. So it sounds like these different perspectives, in close, far away, you can do some things to keep yourself safe, but still get amazing footage.
That's exactly right. And because although the phones have a wide angle lens, yes, you can't really tell what a tornado is doing unless you're far enough away from it to see its direction and the debris it's throwing up, and actually the actual funnel cloud part itself.
Yeah, Austin, just great perspective from a career of covering extreme weather, breaking news, and all kinds of things. Really a pleasure to chat with you. Always enjoy talking with you in any venue, but great to have you here for 2 episodes of the GeoTrek podcast. And again, we're looking forward to seeing each other at the National Tropical Weather Conference in April. Austin, thank you so much for joining us on the GeoTrek podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you so much for having me. I sure enjoyed talking to you, Hal.
Austin, thank you so much for coming on the GeoTrek podcast. I always get so much from every conversation with you. 3 major things I got from this 2-part series. Number 1 is your knack to consistently be unique, think outside the box, and create content that others are not capturing. That's a real great piece of advice for storm chasers, people doing extreme weather field work. We see this a lot in severe weather. There'll be 55 people by the side of the road all filming the same tornado from the same angle. Make an effort to try a different angle, different perspective that others are not capturing. Last year, I went out with the GeoTrek team. I drove over 6,000 miles into severe weather, and I ended up documenting hail, taking a time-lapse video of hail hitting roofs and things like that. I thought there's so many people documenting the funnel clouds and the tornadoes. There aren't that many people doing videography for hail. So it was a different angle. I want to encourage you, when you're out in extreme weather, find those different angles that others are not covering. Can open up a lot of opportunity to expand an audience, but also for us to learn more about science. Number two, I love what Austin said about really learning your technology. The time to learn how your video cameras work and your new technology, your cameras and all of your equipment. The time to learn that is when you're at home in the lab, not when you're out in the field. By the time you get to the field and you're looking at a blizzard or wildfire or tornado, you should really know how your technology works so well that you're just on autopilot. Austin was sharing, if you know how your tech works and you're on autopilot there, you're freeing up bandwidth to make better decisions and also to interact with storm survivors and people out there on the field. So learn your technology ahead of time before you get out there in the field. And number three, I loved what Austin said, that anyone can train themselves to better understand weather. We have a lot of apps and technology now that give you radar imagery and satellite imagery and better forecasting. He said even for him as a videographer and a photojournalist, he's been able to use these tools to, for example, better predict where big hail is going to be in a severe thunderstorm. You generally want to avoid that so it doesn't tear up your chase vehicle. He said, learning how to interpret radar, he's better able to understand what to expect when he gets out there. Those tools and technologies are available to all of us, and you can learn about a lot of those right here on the GeoTrek podcast. Austin, amazing to have these conversations with you. We're going to continue following your work as you get out there in extreme weather. Again, just a very inspirational two-part series here with Austin Anderson, hearing about his survival stories, his adventures into extreme weather, how he's documented it, engaged with others, and lived to tell this story. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you to our audience for tuning in and consistently making us a top-rated podcast on the topic of natural disasters. I'm Hurricane Hal, your host of the GeoTrek podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the GeoTrek podcast.